The city always seemed awake, even at 3 in the morning, when neon lights buzzed like tired bees and hovercars hummed above the streets in neat, regulated lanes. Alex stumbled over his own 2 feet for the 5th time that week, juggling a thermos of coffee and a stack of project files, and cursed under his breath at the infernal gravity of pedestrian crossings that never seemed to account for clumsy human reflexes. It was in this moment of utter, caffeinated distraction that he first noticed her. She was leaning casually against a lamppost, the curve of her long ears catching the light in a way that seemed impossible, as if sculpted from liquid moonlight. Her hair fell in smooth waves, catching iridescent hints of colors that shouldn't exist in nature, and she was humming a tune Alex didn't recognize, though it somehow made his brain insist he knew every note by heart. He froze, thermos tilting, coffee threatening a dive that would ruin both his shoes and his dignity. "Careful there," she said, her voice lilting, melodious, yet somehow carrying a teasing undercurrent. Alex could not tell if she was warning him or mocking him. He suspected both, and the suspicion made him even more flustered. "Do you humans always trip over your own furniture?" Alex blinked. He wasn't aware of any furniture, only himself, his papers, and the sudden, inexplicable urge to look at her for longer than reason dictated. Us sometimes," he muttered. The words felt ridiculous even as they escaped. He realized, embarrassingly, that he had also stopped breathing. She smiled, a small curve that seemed to rearrange the air around her. A faint, almost imperceptible scent filled Alex's senses, sweet but sharp, like metallic honey, and it had the bizarre effect of making him feel like he both wanted to run away and follow her at the same time. When she tilted her head, those ears brushing the air like delicate radar dishes, Alex swore he could read her amusement, even if he didn't understand why he was suddenly utterly transparent to her gaze. "Are you okay?" she asked, though her tone suggested that she already knew the answer. Alex wondered if she could read thoughts too. He hoped not. He wasn't prepared for thought reading. He was still in the middle of thinking about his thermos. Yes, totally." "Fine," he said, though the lie stuck to his tongue with surprising reluctance. She stepped forward, each movement fluid and careful, like a cat measuring gravity, and the city seemed to fall a little quieter around them. Even the hum of hovercars felt muted, as if the world itself had leaned in to watch. "I'm new here," she said. "New to this city, to your species." Her accent was impossible to place, yet it felt familiar in the way dreams sometimes feel familiar. Alex didn't even know he had a species to which she referred. Alex tried to think of something clever to say, but cleverness and caffeine don't mix well, and he ended up with, "Well, welcome, I guess." "That's hospitable," she said, tilting her head again. The movement made her ears sweep through the air like gentle, elongated arcs. "You humans are amusing, fragile but amusing." Alex laughed nervously, realizing that even that laugh sounded wrong, too loud, too forced, yet his chest warmed with a kind of delirious satisfaction. Something about the situation was absurd, but the absurdity was comforting. He wasn't quite sure why. Her smile widened slightly, and the faint scent in the air seemed to twist, teasing, nudging his emotions like a conductor leading an orchestra. A woman passing by glanced at them, paused, then walked a bit faster, only to circle back, glancing again with a puzzled expression. She shrugged and muttered, "Must be the new street performer," before vanishing into a side alley. Alex realized humans didn't normally behave that way. The way they circled back and stared at her, Alex guessed, was probably the pheromones. "Street performer," Alex muttered under his breath, even though it felt more like an accusation than a question. She chuckled, a sound so soft and teasing it made the city itself seem lighter. "You humans are quick to label. It's charming." She walked past him slowly, giving him just enough room to realize that he should probably step aside or risk looking like a bump in the sidewalk. He didn't. Alex followed her anyway, papers threatening an uncontrolled avalanche, and she didn't seem to mind. In fact, she seemed to welcome it. Every step she took seemed deliberate, as if calculating the exact angle to make him feel both cautious and foolishly brave. He kept tripping over things: a small hover drone buzzing past, a street sign, a curb that apparently moved slightly in the night. She smiled each time, the gesture gentle but mischievous, like a parent watching a child try and failed to grasp physics. "You're persistent," she said finally, after they had circled half the district without realizing it. Alex wasn't sure if she meant the city's layout or him personally. Or foolish. Maybe both," Alex offered. "Both," she confirmed, with a nod that made her ears flick slightly, almost like punctuation. "But that's interesting. Humans rarely persist without obvious reward, curious species." "Reward? Well, I'm not really sure there is one," Alex said, realizing he was talking more to himself than to her. He noticed a warmth rising in his cheeks, the faint scent in the air making him unreasonably alert to every subtle movement she made. She tilted her head again, as if reading his inner monologue, and gave a quiet, playful sigh. "Perhaps you are the reward," she said casually, and Alex nearly dropped everything. That was not something any rational human could process at 3 in the morning on an empty street. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out, so he settled for a strangled, Her laugh, soft, musical, and entirely unreplicable, echoed off the metal and glass of the surrounding buildings. Alex realized the night felt lighter, the city somehow less threatening, and even his tumbling papers seemed less urgent. She moved on, walking with a grace that made gravity feel like a polite suggestion rather than a rule, and he followed. Somehow, inexplicably, he knew that this was the start of something impossible and hilarious in equal measure. A night that would ripple through his life like a stone skipping across a neon river. By the time the first hover train clattered overhead, carrying sleepy passengers to a city that had no idea what was happening beneath them, Alex had stopped worrying about logic, physics, or personal safety. He was entirely captivated, entirely human, and entirely under the influence of something he didn't understand. The alien woman turned a corner, her long ears brushing the streetlights, and with a teasing glance back, invited him into a world that balanced precariously between the absurd and the extraordinary. And Alex, tripping over a small grav lamp, stumbled forward, heart racing, grinning like an idiot, ready for whatever impossible chaos awaited. The morning arrived with an indecisive gray sky, hovering like a low-resolution hologram, flickering in and out of clarity. Alex, still nursing the remnants of last night's coffee disaster, shuffled through the office doors of InnoTech Labs, papers clutched like a shield against the mundanity of human existence. Every step felt heavier than usual, though it wasn't fatigue. It was the memory of her, the alien woman, and the faint, lingering sweetness that seemed to cling to the back of his mind, untraceable but insistent. He swore he could still feel the subtle tug of her presence, as if the air itself had been rearranged in her wake. "Alex, you look like a cat who just watched a laser pointer for hours," called Jenna from the lab's central console, barely glancing up from her holographic spreadsheets. "Are you okay? Or did you finally drink too much of that experimental synth coffee again?" "I'm fine," he muttered, though the lie felt clumsy. "Just thinking." He had the sudden urge to add about very important science things, but the words seemed childish. Instead, he concentrated on looking busy, though the room's fluorescent glow couldn't compete with the lingering memory of her curved ears, catching the light as she walked the streets. It was mid-morning when she appeared again, not physically, but in a subtle wave of effect that made Alex twitch, blink, and spill a test tube of luminescent serum simultaneously. The sound drew several heads. "Alex, are you trying to invent liquid fireworks in the office again?" Jenna asked dryly, hands on her hips. He looked up to explain, and no words came. That was the problem. Somehow she had entered his day, and he couldn't quite articulate why gravity seemed less fixed and air seemed more melodic. He realized it wasn't just memory. The pheromones, their weird, imperceptible, almost chemical charm, were spreading invisible threads tugging at subtle human tendencies. Across the lab, scientists who were normally stoic argued over trivial matters. Which centrifuge blade made the better toast? Whether quantum coffee filtration could replace the water cooler entirely, or if holographic paperclips were morally superior to physical ones. Alex groaned, realizing the humor wasn't in the experiments themselves. It was in the chaos she had seeded. By noon, she materialized, or more accurately, she stepped into view at the rooftop cafe above the lab, casually sipping something that shimmered in multiple colors at once. Her ears flicked like radar dishes scanning for amusement. When she noticed Alex, her lips curved in a smile that could have collapsed tectonic plates. "Ah, persistent little human. You followed me again," she said, though she wasn't accusing. She sounded curious. I was just getting lunch." He stammered, realizing that his carefully rehearsed reason sounded like the least believable excuse in the universe. "Lunch, yes," she said, lifting an eyebrow that somehow made the breeze feel warmer, the sun brighter, and Alex's rational thought evaporate like a poorly maintained lab solvent. "And what are your colleagues doing while you abandon them?" "They're, experimenting." He waved vaguely toward the lab, where chaos reigned. A junior scientist had begun reciting the lab safety manual as poetry, complete with dramatic pauses and gestural flourishes, while another debated whether holographic pencils could be considered sentient. She laughed lightly, and it was infectious, like a virus of amusement. "Interesting species," she murmured, swirling her iridescent drink. She leaned closer, and the air shifted again, a subtle hum that Alex felt in his bones. So much potential, so many predictable reactions. She glanced at a passing human couple who suddenly started bickering about which side of the synthetic cobblestone path to walk on, and her ears twitched in delight. Chaos and yet amusingly charming. Alex tried to step back, but his legs seemed uncooperative, as if wired to follow wherever she went. He realized that she wasn't just charming him, she was experimenting, testing how far she could influence humans with subtle nudges, micro-expressions, and just the faintest chemical cues. His logical mind shouted this is unethical, but his limbs were busy spilling his tray and tripping over the edge of the cafe balcony, narrowly saved by the railing. She clapped softly, a sound that made the drones outside pause mid-flight, as if even automated systems were affected by her rhythm. They moved through the city, her presence acting like a gravitational field of absurdity. In a high-security government plaza, she casually strolled among uniformed officers who began debating whether to salute her or simply compliment her hair, resulting in a standoff of polite confusion that Alex found simultaneously terrifying and hilarious. A street musician played offbeat jazz because, inexplicably, the city seemed to demand it, and a corporate drone walked backward for 20 steps before realizing she had entered their perception field. By evening, Alex had begun to notice a pattern. Wherever she went, humans performed minor but increasingly ridiculous tasks, often speaking truths they would normally suppress or engaging in spontaneous, poorly timed displays of talent. A politician recited romantic poetry while delivering a budget report. A cafe barista began juggling espresso machines, and a construction drone tried to waltz instead of lifting girders. Humor spread like wildfire, and yet behind it was the terrifying precision of her influence. She wasn't just amusing herself, she was mapping behavior, studying the limits of attraction, and testing human ethical responses. Alex and she eventually found themselves on a quiet overpass overlooking the city. He leaned on the railing, trying to seem nonchalant, failing spectacularly. "So, you're like, experimenting on everyone?" he asked, voice squeaky from nerves and the lingering effects of her pheromones. "Experimenting is such a clinical word," she replied, tilting her head. "I prefer observation, and influence, and amusement." She swirled her drink, which reflected the neon skyline in shifting patterns. You humans are transparent, delightfully so. Your emotions are fragile, yet malleable. Alex swallowed hard, and me. Her gaze held his for a long moment, ears flicking in subtle rhythm with her words. You're entertaining, resistant in some ways, utterly predictable in others. Most importantly, you're honest, even when you don't know it. She smiled, and it felt like gravity had loosened just enough for him to float a few inches above the ground. A drone buzzed by too close, spilling a load of synthetic foam onto a nearby bench, and she laughed, the sound like wind chimes caught in a storm. Alex realized that chaos and amusement weren't just consequences. They were tools she wielded effortlessly. And yet, the more he watched her, the more he sensed that curiosity and perhaps something like affection drove her experiments as much as domination did. The sun finally dipped beneath the horizon, leaving the city in a neon twilight that flickered and pulsed like an artificial heartbeat. Alex felt a strange mixture of exhilaration and helplessness. She turned to him, ears brushing the night air, eyes glinting with unspoken mischief. Tomorrow, she said softly, we explore further. There's so much more to observe, and of course more humans to amuse. Alex groaned, though a grin spread across his face. Somehow, he knew he would follow her again, stumble over his own feet, and marvel at the chaos she unleashed. Humanity was fragile, unpredictable, and absurd, and he was entirely caught in the orbit of a being who could bend all three with a smile, a gesture, and that faint, impossible scent that lingered like starlight in his senses. And somewhere, deep in the city's electric hum, Alex laughed, realizing that the absurdity, the chaos, and the charm were only beginning. The city pulsed under a sky streaked with neon auroras, a chaotic network of drones and flying vehicles reflecting off glass towers that stretched like metal trees into the night. Alex stumbled along the elevated walkways, coffee in hand because it was, by some stubborn human habit, still necessary, though he was increasingly unsure if caffeine or the lingering pheromones in the air were keeping him upright. The alien woman was already there, perched on the edge of a sky bridge like a creature at ease in gravity's gentle pull. Her ears twitched in the dim light, catching faint currents of wind and sound, and her iridescent hair shimmered, scattering the city lights into tiny rainbows. Late, she said, though her tone was teasing, almost conspiratorial. Alex shuffled forward, tripping over a grav lamp, which she caught with a flick of her hand, a small, elegant movement that somehow made the rescue seem accidental and deliberate at once. I thought you'd given up on observing humans altogether, she added, and Alex realized that she didn't merely speak. She orchestrated each word to tug at thoughts he hadn't realized he had. I've been strategizing, he stammered, realizing strategy sounded more competent than the truth. He'd been panicking over the potential global consequences of her subtle manipulations. She laughed, a light melodic sound that made the hover drones pause mid-flight and a few pedestrians glance around, puzzled. Strategizing, charming. You humans always exaggerate your intentions. I merely influence, amuse, guide. Alex watched as, with a gentle wave of her hand, the city seemed to sway in minor chaos. Corporate leaders engaged in spontaneous debates about the ethical merits of artificial pets versus holographic ones. Traffic drones began weaving intricate patterns as though performing for an invisible audience. Street performers created impromptu operas on intersections. Even Alex's favorite cafe barista, normally stoic, juggled coffee cups with perfect comedic timing while reciting haikus about quantum computing. Global influence is exhausting, Alex admitted, leaning on the railing, heart racing. You could literally, he gestured vaguely at the skyline, control everything, but why stop at chaos? Why not, he hesitated, realizing the suggestion sounded naive and naive. Why not the obvious domination route? Her ears twitched, a movement subtle yet expressive, like punctuation for thought. Because, she said softly, control without observation is meaningless. Humans in their absurdity provide insight, amusement, affection, and occasionally honesty. Her eyes flicked toward him, and Alex felt a warmth in his chest he didn't understand. She studied him with a gaze that combined curiosity, appraisal, and the faintest trace of fondness. By midday, they were in the heart of the government district. Her influence had spread wider. City officials, security drones, and the public interacted with a surreal harmony that bordered on comedic. One official, mid-sentence during a high-security briefing, began reciting limericks about quantum entanglement. A security robot, normally precise and unyielding, attempted pirouettes instead of patrol. Alex, observing the scene, felt a mixture of panic and fascination, though he caught himself laughing at the absurdity. He realized she had taught him something profound. Sometimes influence, even when unearned, could reveal unexpected joy in humanity's fragility. "I need to talk to you," Alex said as they ducked into a quieter corridor between two holographic towers. This level of control, it's not ethical. People aren't just data points." His voice trembled, half fear, half genuine concern. She regarded him silently for a long moment, the faint pheromone influence still humming, but she stepped closer, lowering herself to match his height with an elegance that seemed impossible. "And yet," she said almost wistfully, "you followed anyway. You resisted some but also participated. Humans are unpredictable, delightful, honest, as I said." Alex sighed, realizing he was tired of being manipulated, yet strangely unwilling to reject her completely. "So what now?" he asked. "Do we end this?" "We could," she said, her ears flicking as if weighing possibilities. "Or we could choose collaboration, observation guided by consent, influence tempered by choice." She smiled, and the city seemed to exhale, a collective sigh of relief and anticipation. "It's novel and amusing." Over the next several hours, Alex helped her implement subtle changes. Not domination, but guidance. Redirecting corporate greed toward humanitarian technology, guiding urban planning drones to create parks and communal spaces, and introducing humorous but harmless interventions in politics to reduce tension. Her pheromones remained potent, but Alex learned to interpret their effect, creating a partnership of sorts where she influenced and he mediated, humanizing the outcome. By evening, the skyline had shifted. Streets hummed with controlled chaos, organized but alive. Laughter and unexpected creativity echoed across plazas. Drones performed acrobatic shows, and holographic ads displayed poems alongside commercial pitches. Humanity had not been enslaved. It had been guided into a collective absurdity that was productive, playful, and oddly inspiring. Alex finally turned to her, the weight of the day pressing on him. "You've changed everything," he said. "And yet, somehow, it feels like it was always supposed to be this way." She tilted her head, ears brushing the neon light. "And you," she said softly, "have learned observation, negotiation, patience. Resistance is instructive, curiosity rewarding. Humans have value beyond predictability." He smiled, exhausted, exhilarated, and strangely proud. "And me. You," she said, with a tone that was both teasing and sincere, "have become influential in ways your species seldom achieves. Not through power, but through choice, honesty, and humor. Delightful." For a long moment, they stood together above the city, the skyline shimmering like liquid light. Alex realized he had changed. Once timid, anxious, and predictably cautious, he now felt capable of navigating the unpredictable, absurd, and extraordinary. Humanity, he realized, was resilient not because of logic alone, but because it was inherently flawed, creative, and capable of joy even under subtle manipulation. The alien woman leaned back slightly, ears flicking as if in satisfaction, and whispered, "Tomorrow, perhaps, we explore other cities. But tonight, let us watch your species laugh at itself." Alex laughed, genuinely this time, feeling the absurd harmony of chaos and guidance, humor and influence, science and alien charm. Together, they watched as the city moved and breathed like a living organism, humans dancing to unseen rhythms, unaware of the delicate orchestration above them. He understood now that influence was not about domination, control, or fear. It was about insight, restraint, and choice. And the city, absurdly vibrant, alive, and impossibly human, continued its nocturnal ballet, a testament to both alien curiosity and human resilience, while Alex and the woman, perched like unlikely partners in chaos, shared a quiet understanding. The world could be guided without breaking it, and laughter could be more powerful than